In this series, I try to talk to every small parties that we don't normally see in the media for those 2025 Canadian elections. So that's why I talked to Liz White from the Animal Protection Party. Normally, I do those videos in French, but for this one, it couldn't be done, so that's why I'm in English today. But if you need it to be translated in French, I can do it. It would be fine. I'm just gonna do a little recap. Donc, comme que je viens de le dire, habituellement, je fais ces vidéos-là en français. Donc, si vous avez besoin d'un petit récapitulatif, je peux le faire avec plaisir. But if not, if you want to support me in English, that's fine. If there's enough like, views, and comments on this video, I might consider switching back again to English. So, show me some love, I guess. So yeah, my goal with this series is to help democracy by showing what's out there in Canada in terms of ideas and also as what parties are out there. So be sure to follow along. I'm going to let you with the interview now. So thank you a lot for being here. So my first question today would be, what is the motivation behind the organization of an animal protection party in Canada?
Well, we decided that in 2005, there was a significant court case in which the Communist Party of Canada and the government of Canada were butting heads about the requirement to have 50 candidates in order to become a real party. And they won that at the Supreme Court. The Communist Party won it at the Supreme Court. And it was when that decision was had and the government decided to say, if you have one person elected, you can become a party. In 2005, the end of 2005, we began to prepare for that. And then I ran myself as a candidate, just one of us to get the party formally thing. That was in 2006. So it's been in existence a long time. But really, the example that we have looked at is Party for the Animals in the Netherlands. They have proportional representation there. And that party has elected people to the European Parliament, people to the national government there, people to the other levels of government, all the way down to water quality people and so on. And so they run the elections differently than we do, but it's clear that once you have proportional representation, there's a real motive to actually get somebody elected and represented in Parliament. And we know from Party from the Animals, even though they don't have a majority, they have 5, 6, 7 people elected at their national level. They've been able to affect significant change for animals and the environment, well beyond their voting ability, and if you were in a first past the post system. So we decided that we would do that. We would fight for proportional representation. So currently we're in the process of supporting Fair Voting BC and Springtide, who are the applicants to taking the whole issue to the Supreme Court. We've been supporting them with significant financial donations, and now we're seeking intervention into the Supreme Court once it goes there, if it goes there. So, we're following that. The rest of the time, we're pitching a party that's really different from everybody else. It talks about compassionate politics. And what that means is that we're inclusive. Not only of human beings, but beyond human beings, to look to satisfy interests that are beyond us, right? The interest of animals, interests of the environment, and so on and so forth. And working through a way to migrate, to transition to that approach in a way that begins to help people understand that we can't live the way we're living right now, or, the environment is showing us that it's really bad, that in order to run a proper economy, you have to consume as much as possible. And the minute consumption drops, the economy falls apart. And as we're going to see with the trade tariffs. And so the approach is to transition out of that process and to move to a sustainable living environment. And that includes not eating animals, not raising them for agriculture, not, running agriculture, which is a significant contribution to global warming, in a very different way, but in a way that we can be compassionate to the farmers and compassionate to the animals. So we transition carefully out of this into a largely alternative way of living.
kind of a fun thing that you brought the Communist Party. I talked to them yesterday, and they did talk to me about this representative measures that they wanted to that they fought for in court. So
Yeah.
it's a
It
funny
was an
talk.
incredible, victory. Really
Hmm.
incredible victory. I mean, rarely does the Supreme Court rule in the favor of like little parties like us, or the Communist Party, or the People's Party, whatever. Usually they don't, but they listened to it this time, and I think they made a really good decision.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a change that could impact in a good way the representation of Canadians on the government.
Yeah, there
So
isn't
that,
there
oh,
isn't a
go ahead.
hope though, without proportional representation, to get a party on the map politically, federally, and provincially. So, it's really important. If that loses, well, we'll have to approach it a different way. Hopefully it doesn't, and we can get somebody elected.
So that would be like the principal goal of this election for the party.
It's one of the principal goals. The second principal goal is Mr. Polyev has been threatening to expand the seal hunt again. Now, we're into global warming. The ice isn't lasting as long in the North Atlantic. The harp seals require ice to whelp, so they have to have ice in order to give birth to their pups. And the pups need, the pups need 2 or 3 weeks to actually. The mother feeds them for that length of time. They get really fat, full of fatty milk and stuff, and then they molt, and then they can get in the water. If they don't molt as fast as the ice is melting, then they drown. So it has a great impact on the seal population. And beside that, there is no market for seal pelts, seal meat, seal anything. So and the pelts used to be used for fur. Fur is out of fashion. People aren't wearing it as much. And at the age that they're now killing them for pelts, the pelts are not like the little fluffy white seals that you see when they're just born. So he's threatening to increase the seal hunt. And so one of our motivations is to get that as highlighted as much as possible, and kind of make it a toxic issue for anybody to touch, so they don't go back to that issue again and again. We've fought this many times over the years. And the third thing that we're really focused on, two things. First, the third thing is Canada has become the largest importer of long-tailed macaque monkeys for research. And those animals are coming. The U.S. that did the investigation found that these animals were coming from the wild. So under CITES, they can use macaque monkeys, but they have to be bred. They have to be bred. They can't be caught in the wild because they don't want the population to decrease. But because of the money involved, because of the country involved, which is Cambodia, it's unclear and uncertain whether there's lying on the import items, that they're saying that they're capped bred. But if you look at the colonies that they have, they couldn't possibly produce that many monkeys in that short period of time. So there's a real indication that these are coming from the wild, and there's an indication that the population is in serious decline. So we're trying to get that stopped. Charles River used to get them imported into the States until the States actually, the Fish and Wildlife people down there actually did an investigation and found that very, very likely these animals are coming from the wild, and they forbidded any import of those animals into the U.S. So Charles River, which also has a thing in Canada, an office in Canada, imported them into Canada. Canada says they're okay. Everything looks great, but the indication is for everybody that that's not the fact. So we're in the process of fighting that. And the fourth thing is pesticides. So we've been in a long fight to get Compound 1080 and Strychnine banned because they're used to control wolf and coyote populations. They're incredibly cruel poison. And if one of the other wild animals eats the carcass, they also die. So it has an expanding effect of it. We managed to get a strychnine banned last year, I can't remember, sometime quite soon. And so the one thing left on the plate is Alberta, who uses compound 1080 to control coyotes who tend to go after sheep and cattle and stuff. And so, but there are other ways of doing that. So we're building a case now to get strychnine. And so we'll appeal to the government to do that. And yeah. I guess the final thing, there's a long list of issues. So
That's fine.
Okay, the final thing is that we're working to get Parks Canada to stop culling animals in their parks. So the two major parks that we've been involved with is the cormorants that are living on Middle Island, which is part of Point Pelee National Park. The island you can't go to it. You're not allowed on it during breeding season. And so it's out in the middle of the lake, and the Parks Canada decided that having cormorants there was damaging the ecosystem, even though they're part of the ecosystem, and have been shooting them since 2008. And they've, so that's what, that's 25 years or whatever of shooting cormorants. So we go out and observe it every year. We're planning to go out this year as well. And the second thing that we did, and this is very recent because we won it in December along with the residents, was the Sydney Island area, which has a park and some people living on it. So it's like a combination thing. The Parks Canada people thought that they should eradicate all the deer there, and there was a uprising from some of the residents there, and we decided to help them to get it stopped because it's ridiculous that they shoot. Well, they didn't know how many animals there were, so they decided to shoot. Anyway, it became a big issue. It became kind of toxic, and Parks Canada so far has backed off doing it. There were 3 phases to this. The first phase was implemented. They killed 84 deer, and both ones that are not native and ones that were native. And then the second phase, which is much more radical, they backed off. But they cull in parks all across the country.
Okay, great. So I understand the goals behind the party, and also the main objective is to just assure a safe life for the environment, for animals, for humans, so for every living thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
And but because we talk about compassionate politics, it's about how we move to what is a pretty radical change in most people's minds, I think. How we move to that in a way that we help people transition out of animal agriculture, and then help them transition from big farming, where you have great big swaths of land and huge vehicles and lots of pesticides and lots of this and lots of that, into a more environmentally friendly way of farming. But not just saying you have to do it, helping them transition.
Okay. So what would be like a perfect Canada for the Animal Protection Party, if say they were in power to impact everything and do everything as they wanted to achieve the Canada that they wanted?
Well, if we were to do that and get achieved, I think a perfect Canada would be where we had, because it has to be democratic. We're a democratic country, and so we have to figure out how to do it democratically, right? So, and it's really important to get people's buy-in, because if you force people to do these things, then they get their backs up, and then then you have a barrier that you have to overcome. So, a perfect would be an ability for us, I guess, to be in power and to begin to talk about a transition and how it might be. And then if there was agreement, if we had a majority vote, or even a buy-in to the idea by the politicians, then we would very slowly begin to move away from having animals in agriculture. You know, we kill millions and millions and millions of animals, so we think we have to eat them all, which isn't good for our health and not good for the environment, not good for the ecosystem, and certainly not good for the animals. And so that would be perfect if we moved directly away from that. If we agreed that we're at a point in the environment where we are at very great risk of we've passed the tipping point in terms of global warming. So the question is, can we convince people enough that we have to change our way of living and then move to a really, really sustainable living for the environment and bring down our contribution to global warming. I mean, many people say, we're a small country, we don't contribute as much as many other countries, why would you bother? But you have to take responsibility for what we do to the planet. And I think if you really dig down deep, most people who have children and most young people who want a future are really interested in the environment and what's going to happen. And when you look at the state of the environment, where animals are going extinct, where huge swaths of the country are burning, where, in other places of the country it's so hot, monkeys are dropping out of trees dead because they can't stand the heat anymore. So, we're able, and I think that would make us a perfect world.
How do you manage to get support against working something as big as the multinational companies, against the capital, against everything on those lines?
Well, I think we're looking at a time when all the politicians are talking about significant change as to how we operate in Canada because of what's happening south of the border with President Trump. And so it's forced us really to rethink how we operate in the world. And I don't think this is going to happen, but it is a fantastic opportunity to change how we do business. And it will make us more sustainable if we're internally sustainable, that we can provide for ourselves in the most significant way that we can. I think, when you look at what we're facing now with tariffs and all sorts of things, thousands of people losing their jobs, no ability to figure out what's going on, no ability to figure out how to rebuild. We're in the middle of an election. We have different things flying at us every day. I think we have a really good opportunity. And Mark Carney's talked about this, but he's not going to begin to transition in the way that we had hoped. But it opens up the discussion to say, we have the ability to relook at things, redefine things, and rework things so that we can do the best we can in terms of the environment and the animals and ourselves. But it's a big deal. I think Mark Carney, if he becomes prime minister, he has a long road to hoe to deal with this issue because so many people are out of work and there's no other opportunities, and it's going to take a long time to rebuild internally our markets and stuff, and that's going to mean that people are going to be dependent on aid and all sorts of stuff. And if we go on and there's a recession, that's going to be even worse. But I would look at all of those as an opportunity. Sadly, I would say an opportunity because people are being very badly hurt by this, but an opportunity to begin to take care of ourselves as opposed to depending on other people to provide us with things. And anyway, trying to ship oranges from Florida and, peaches from Georgia and avocados from California is just ridiculous. I mean, we need to learn to live with the products that we can grow here.
So, like, the model will be a simplified economy and just being self-sufficient. So we save on transport, we save on investment, and we just work together. But uh, how would the job market work if we cut out export and all those kind of businesses that are not, let's say, environmentally friendly?
Well, I think we're going to capture all of them because at the moment we have a president who's applying tariffs and then reactive tariffs and then all these kind of tariffs. And, what every company that has been interviewed is talking about is that it makes it impossible to do imports because it ain't, or exports or imports because it costs too much now to do it. And it makes the cost of cars go up. They're saying by about $6,000, maybe even higher, depending on whether there are any more tariffs coming. And but it is true. We have to deal with the oil and gas industry, and that's going to be a difficult process. But in the end, we have to deal with it because it's a significant contribution to global warming. It's hurting the environment more in Alberta than anywhere else, I would guess. And so I think it's not like we have an option. People will argue that we do, but I think people as young as you, people who have families, looking forward to the kind of environment that you might be living in, if nobody pays attention to it anymore, is going to be more than challenging in changing the way we do business here.
Okay. When I was preparing this interview and looking up your party a little bit, I was just thinking for a normal person interested in politics, wanting to vote for the right parties that represent themselves, what's the when you look at the Green parties, there's the Green Party, there's the your party, which is a Animal Protection Party, but what's the fundamental difference between those two? Like, what's the clash that made you create, or I don't know which one came first, but what made
Oh,
the decision to be different?
the Green Party came first, I think,
Okay.
at the federal level, or maybe around the same time, actually. They had a leader there who actually pushed the party to run candidates in every riding and all sorts of different things, and he was great. I think the significant difference is that what I find with the Green Party is they are silent on one of the significant contributions to global warming, and that's animal agriculture. They will not talk about it, and they will not address and say what needs to be said about it. And I think you got to make a commitment. If you're green, I think you got to make a commitment that all aspects of the environment need to be protected, and they need to have the hard conversations. Even they would do better under proportional representation, and that would be great because they do fight for the environment, which is good. We need people who fight for the land and protect it. But you gotta, it's like if you want to save an apartment building, but you don't care whether anybody lives there. I mean, that's what we're talking about in the environment. You save the land, you save the forest, but what about its inhabitants? Why aren't you saving those? And why aren't you protecting those inhabitants from industries that cause issues? And they're good on oil and gas and that kind of thing, but they will not, nor will the other parties talk about animal agriculture. And as a result, we have an industry that is contributing massively to global warming, and we should be addressing that.
Okay, that's clear. Like for a comparison between the parties, so they're a bit milder, even though they protect the environment, but they don't go all in.
Right.
Probably because agriculture, animal agriculture, is also like a lobby that has to be
Yeah.
for votes and things like that. So that's probably why they lay back a little bit on this, I would assume.
Yeah, I think it's like it is a tough industry to fight. I got to tell you, we do a fair amount of it, and we're challenging the ag law in we're interveners in the ag law in Ontario, and you realize the extent. The lobby, it's interesting in this court case, the animal agriculture people are not engaged in the court case, but the government is really standing on their behalf. And so, but I think ultimately you have to live by your values. And, if you are part of contributing to the animal agriculture industry, you got to stop it. You look at, it doesn't matter how many times, I've been to many places, animal slaughterhouses, animal auction barns, in barns where dairy animals are, where, they have calves, veal calves that are raising, and been in chicken barns multiple times, looked at the assembly line for killing chickens, all those, I've done all those. And there is no way that this government can ensure that those animals are humanely treated. There's just too many of them. They're moving constantly. It starts at the farm, where the farmer just loads animals that he doesn't want anymore because he don't want to pay for somebody to come and kill them, and they're not transportable. So there's suffering that goes on, tremendous suffering that goes on with these animals, and yet we all just turn our eyes and pretend we don't know anything about it. And so I think that the biggest fight there, it's a big fight, but I think the fight is better had in terms of the environment. Sadly, I would like to fight it on animal cruelty, but I think that's not a winnable case given what we're talking about with animal agriculture. So I think it's an environmental issue. And I would urge the Green Party to get on the bandwagon. They don't look very progressive in that sense.
On the animal farming industry, would you cut everything, like even not only the meat, but also like just the normal exploitation about eggs or milk or stuff like that? Like, would it be for a vegan, or vegetarianism would be fine also? Or
Probably vegan, because if you look at the dairy industry, for one, it's horrible.
Yeah, true.
It's they have to have bull cows to to provide, so that they have calves with females, and they bred those cows until they cannot deliver anymore. And if you see cull dairy cows, they are in horrible condition. They usually drag it on as far as they can. And the calves, if they're male, poor little things, become veal calves. So when you go to a slaughterhouse and you look at a whole trailer load of like 4-week-old animals, like tiny, tiny little animals, taken away from their mothers, stuck in a little box, fed milk, and then shipped off when they're just a little bit bigger. And as for the eggs come from chickens who are bred to lay as much eggs as possible. And so these birds are horribly treated. They're mostly in cages. They're mostly with others that they have no real room, no privacy, no death bats, none of that. In barns that are totally dark most of the time. They lay eggs constantly. They get pecked. And then when the eggs start to decline, they're hauled out. One barn that I know of was 40,000 chickens who had been in a heated barn in dark, and were loaded onto their trucks in the middle of the night at minus 15 degrees or something. I can't remember. It was really, really cold and windy. And these birds were practically featherless because they pluck their feathers, they, do all that sort of stuff. So those two industries are just cruel. There's no other way around it. And, we can say it's okay, we understand, but we're going to tolerate it anyway. But going vegan, I think, if you really want to protect animals, all animals in that industry, you go vegan.
Would you be fine with like people having a few chicken at home, with a chicken coop, just living life and not like industries? Would it be fine, or would it be just a little step better?
Well, it's really interesting because I live in Toronto and we had a rule that people could have backyard chickens. And so you learn a lot about the industry when that happens. So most people rent a chicken. So they go to some place that runs a rent a chicken operation. And for whatever money, $800, $900, $1,000, you get a little coop delivered to your backyard and you get like 4 or 5 chickens. However, the industry also offers chickens by mail. So you can put chicks in a box, mail it by Canada Post to somebody, whomever, and you hope to God that they pick it up on time, because if they don't, the chicks die. And so they don't have water, they don't have food, they have a yolk that the industry argues that they live on while they're being transported by mail. But does anybody really think that that's humane? Putting chickens in a box, sticking it in the mail? What happens if they were mailed during the strike? They would have been, well, they would have been dead. And then, so, you know, you ask yourself, maybe it's really great to have a few chickens around, because, you know, chickens are actually wonderful animals and really interesting. And I would, you know, having a chicken would be fantastic, but I wouldn't have it because I wouldn't buy into the industry. You know, I'd have my chicken until she died at 15, as opposed to somebody who kills them when they're not laying eggs anymore and getting another. So, you know, I look at that animal as an entity that needs to be cared for, life enriched, live as long as possible. Most other people are thinking, how many eggs can I get out of this chicken? And when it stops, what am I going to do with this bird? And interesting, even more interesting, in Toronto, there's no vets that understand how to take care of chickens. And so if a chicken gets sick, what do we do about it? So, you know, you sort of think those things are really great, but honestly, I think if we just got out of the business, but I think while we're getting out of the business, actually, anybody who might take 2 or 3 chickens that don't have to be killed, and shelter them, you know, rescue and shelter them, as opposed to having them for your own purpose, is probably going to be needed for most farm animals anyway. And I think that if the volume is so big that it would be difficult to accommodate, but we should try and figure out how to accommodate as many as we can.
Great, that's a different way to looking at it, that most people probably don't see it that way. So it's great that you kind of brought it up in that sense.
So I'm going to tell you, we rescued, way back 2011, we rescued 9 cows and got them to a sanctuary. They were going to be sent to slaughter. We decided that we would take them. So, but they've lived 14 years. So you can imagine how difficult it's going to be to find care for animals in the volume that we have. So anyway, I just thought I'd point out, you know, it's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah, I would assume. Is there a point that you would like to bring up that we haven't discussed yet? So for the electorate, or for people to know?
I guess most people think voting for our party is a wasted vote. And I would fundamentally disagree. I think it would be important to look at the party and look at the values that the party puts forward, because it goes well beyond animal agriculture. But I like to talk about that because it's Animal Protection Party. The vote demonstrates a rise in the attention of people on Canada who are looking for an alternative, compassionate approach to politics, that the mainstream political parties don't have. And I think that's why it's a opposition vote in many ways. We know we're not going to win. The more votes we get, the more interested the parties look at us to say, they're making some advances here, and I think it would be really great if we could make more advances. And the problem is, you need to run candidates and all that sort of stuff. We're not going to run that many. The most we've run is about 20. And they were all across the country. This time they're across the country from Newfoundland to BC, but we're few and far between. So we need to figure out how to do more candidates, and PR would significantly help that.
I'll try to help out a bit on that that front, but I can't assure anything. Would you what would be a successful election for the party? Like what would be some good milestones to achieve this year? I mean this month.
This month, yeah. No.
But I mean for the politics that would be I mean, you know what I mean. I'm getting lost.
I
in my
know
questions.
exactly what you mean. It was supposed to be in October.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess a milestone for us would be an increase in the number of votes we get for the candidates that are running. And that would be great. I think another milestone would be that we use every opportunity, because we get free airtime, because we're a registered political party, and we may buy some time to reach out to people to talk about how important it is to get out to vote, but B, to really think through what you're doing. I mean, I think Carney will likely win. It looks like he's well ahead in the polls. We're still like 3.5 weeks until the election, so who knows? But you can change your vote. You can change for a small party, a party that reflects your values, and that's what I think I'm hoping people will do, and that would be a milestone.
So that's how my interview with Liz White from the Animal Protection Party went. If you want to know more, you can ask me in comments. I can contact them once again. Thank you a lot for being here, and I would really appreciate if you liked and subscribe. And if this video blows up, as I said, I might go back in English if needed, or I'm gonna continue in French. You can also comment down below, because I'm doing this for fun, but why not get views at the same time? Thank you again. I'm gonna see you in the next one in about 2 days.